Welcome to the start of our session. And like magic, you've all created something in 2 seconds, and we're going to count down so you can share that. So 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, please share. 1.
Can I do a screen capture?
You may.
Okay.
Hold it still, that's lovely. Take a deep breath and let go.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you. So welcome to tonight's session. That was another way of role modeling a start of a session that you could maybe adapt. You can consider yourself how that might work with clients, how that might not. I often find it helpful when I work a lot with adolescents and they want to come and see me and they've asked to come and see me as the counsellor, and they then sit there and I'm thinking, okay, and I've got lots of tricks like that on my sleeve, but I'm thinking, okay, you got half an hour, you know, what would you like to talk about, you know, and all, and you know, at times they just can't find the words, which is why we're therapeutic art practitioners, and something like that can help stimulate their state of mind and what they really want to share. Okay, so Hadaya is going to start our slides for this evening, and in fact tonight's about the opposite. It's all about closing. So we're going to get to grips with the ins and outs of some top tips, some best practice, some ideas for closing. Typically, as therapeutic art practitioners, we consider art reviews or exhibits or a combination of both. And with Hadaya having a lot of online experience, and myself, groups and individuals, outdoors and indoors, together we can talk through that. How would you close? We're going to also do a recap of TAPS 1, all the 4 sessions, well, 3 of them mainly. Any questions that you have throughout tonight, if you've got questions you brought with you, great. Any questions that stimulate, just write them down. We have time for question and answer. And then there's a couple of slides to prepare you for TAPS 2. And it's amazing that you've all enrolled. I did not doubt that, but I'm glad to see that we continue our journey together. Yeah. So let's start. That would be great. A good old reminder of the scope of practice. So instead of listening to me recap, who would like to offer to just try to explain the scope of practice, pretending that we're all a new group in just a couple of minutes? Who would like to try to do that? Or to remind ourselves as a group what's important for us as tappers to be aware of? I'm trying to get you all on screen so I can see anyone with a hand up. There we go.
So a client would have, it's Janet, a client would have a wide range of needs, and depending on your qualifications, it looks like it goes from a psychiatrist, MD, to a therapist, to a registered art therapist or psychologist, and then up to a professional art therapist counselor, and then to a TAPS person with TAPS training. And actually I went back to this picture this week because somebody said, oh, could you join me? And I went to the iceberg picture and I said, no, I'm on module 1. So thank you. Yeah.
Oh. Good. Thank you, Janet, for that. Any other comments or thoughts or reflections you've had about this since we've been introducing it in the last month? Or anything that doesn't sit right with you and you have tension with or you're frustrated by? That's also valid. Netta.
Hi, everyone. Just curious if what comes to mind to me, what if it's a situation you recognize that you need to sort of refer them to someone else, but how do you say that in a very sensitive way without just without coming off like you don't want to deal with their issues, right?
Mm-hmm. That's a really good question. How do you deal with someone without making them feel abandoned or rejected, or you don't care about them? Yeah, I'm going to keep that question here. We'll come back to it. Okay, but thank you. I'll write it down. Any other good questions, reflections?
I think it's looking at the scope of practice. It sounds like a lot of people come with different backgrounds, different experiences, different whatever, work or education, whatever. But I think it's really important to remember that, like, right now we're in the little canoe coming towards the iceberg, or kayak, I guess. And to remember the work that we are doing with our clients needs to be at the right level, that we don't delve into things that we're not qualified for, because sometimes we have all this other experience from different places, whatever, but we may want to delve a little deeper and we're not qualified. So for me, it's remembering I am coming into this as a TAPS, and that's what the level that I'm going to be supporting people at.
Yeah.
So it's just,
yeah, and a bit connected to Netta's question, but Hadara and I were talking earlier. Of course, there might be times where someone really trusts you and they go down there a bit, and you're snorkeling all of a sudden, or even down to the submarine, and it's an honor that they trust you that much, and it's how to make them resurface. So by the time they've left, you've signposted them to resources, and you're still there for them and welcome them back next week, but that they have signpost to other support too, should they wish to take that. So it's not just all on your shoulders, but you're not kicking them out of class or anything like that. So it's about the additional support. But yeah, it's remembering this scope of practice.
Sorry.
No, sorry, Corda. I was going to add that it's, to remember that it's about therapeutic arts practitioner, and because you're learning about the arts and the art materials and the symbolism and the psychology behind that throughout the course, that's the bit where so many of you have so much experience in conversation and discussion, and that's wonderful. What does the arts have in this role as a TAPA, which is module 2? Cara Jane.
No, sorry, I was going to jump off of what Netta and Carolyn were saying as well, or asking, was how do you maintain the confidence they have in you when you have to pass off to someone else? You kind of touched on that it's making them feel like they're still welcome, but how do you maintain their confidence in what they've already done with you, and they feel like it was worthwhile when you hand them off? That was what I was wondering as well.
Mm-hmm. I don't want to answer everything by fixing everything, because whatever I say is the only way. It's just a suggestion. Okay, I'm not the oracle of all knowledge, but I have worked with some students before that they continued with me until the 9 sessions were done. But it was evident that, let's just say in this one particular case of this boy called X, he wasn't diagnosed yet, but it was becoming evident that very likely that he had an eating disorder, joined in with grief of losing his father. And even as a clinical art therapist, it was becoming beyond my scope. And so, as to my advantage, we hadn't got a relationship as such that I was the only one he would trust. We were starting out, and before it got down that road, I realized very quickly to not let it get down that road, because it's beyond my scope. I'm not an expert in eating disorders and the secrecy that goes potentially with that, and what they need. And so I did talk to him and to his mother, who then got a child pediatrician involved, and now that kid's got the proper care they need in that sense. But what I did with them was I looked within my scope of what that kid still needed, and I went through a grief process with him to help him grieve the loss of his father. So although he had more manifestations and more stuff on his shoulders, there was a tiny bit that I could do with him, kind of bring that to a full stop. And then he went off to get more care in other places. And it just felt natural that way. So I guess not trying to force a rush in a change, unless it's, you know, if it's complete self-harm, it can be harm to you and them and others. And yes, sometimes you have to do a, I'm sorry, but as much as I appreciate you telling me this information, if it's to do with harm, I have to pass it on. And it's, you know, you have to, I have to call Child Protection Services, or, but how would you like me to phrase it? And how would you like me to share your story? And so if it is a more extreme case like that, then yes, Netta, you have to refer on and hold some of that awkwardness of, but I just told you something. But you would have had that conversation of like, if you tell me something that's like that, I have to pass it on. But if it's other stuff, like I've just shared my story of this boy, it felt very natural and it didn't feel like I was passing him off. Does that make sense? You know, the phrases were like, there are people, I know someone, I know this organization called The Foundry, and they have the care that you need on top of what I can give you about this. And so using phrases like that, it's about a team and teamwork, and not like I can and I can't and they can and they can't, but it's this big team. Yeah. Does that help? If I think of anything else and Hadaya thinks of stuff, we'll obviously like answer more later. Anyone else? Go on.
Sorry. I like how you included honoring their strength to, you know, be able to share those really difficult things with you, and validating how challenging that is, and that you really want them to be successful. So that's part of why we're going to pass them on to someone in that, whatever direction that is. Yeah.
And sometimes it can become a multifaceted situation where they are seeing someone else for a stretch of time and then they come back to you again. And that's normal too. So, yeah. I can't wait to see you again. And you know,
it's kind of pros. Sorry, is it okay if I say something? There's kind of what I was thinking about last week, the pros and cons to not having an overseeing agency, because I'm in a similar situation being a speech language pathology assistant. You know, these things that there are things that I can and can't do. I can't diagnose, but I can do everything else under the care, guidance, and supervision of an SLP. So sometimes it is quite useful to be able to say, I always give the example with my students of a dental assistant and dentist, because they get that I'm like the dental assistant and there's stuff that I do, and then there's stuff that the dentist, because they're a dentist, has to do. And so we kind of transfer things between us. And so I've just come up with this phrase of, oh, that's a dentist thing. Because sometimes parents will say to me, you know, oh, Bridget, could you, you know, work on this with them or work on that with them? Oh, we'll have to check with so-and-so because that's a dentist thing. And so we just do it that way, because but then in that situation, there are written guidelines of what I can and can't do. But there's always that gray area.
And Hadaya and I were actually talking about how, Bridget, in our group, you're an example of a TAPA versus a clinical art therapist and beyond, in the sense of like an assistant and, you know, the SLP assistant and an SLP. Is it speech pathologist, right?
Speech language pathologist and speech language pathology assistant.
That's right.
It's
it's very similar like that, a TAPA and a clinical art therapist. And although I value both courses and other courses, and I've got, you know, friends in other mental health fields, and we're passing notes on to each other. I'm going to conferences on counselors and not just art therapy all the time, and basically stealing ideas, which is fabulous, sharing best practice. So it's, some of you even out of this group will probably want to do the diploma course. As a couple of you already mentioned on your target from last week, I looked on Moodle before tonight and saw everyone's examples, and I don't want to mention names, but there are a few on there that I thought, okay, you clearly want to do the diploma course because you clearly want to work with clients who go deep or are more anxious or more complicated. So, you know that and recognize that in yourself and consider, you know, going further down the iceberg with training, and that's okay too, obviously. If we go on to the next slide, Hadaya, we can actually see concretely a bit of what we're talking about here.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Yeah, this slide, as you can read, distinguishes the therapeutic art practitioner on the left and a professional art therapist, certified art therapist on the right. And so what are you able to do? You will be and are able, just as a reminder, we've mentioned it already, to support the client. And I think we've mentioned before that if you feel that they're talking about trauma, like that's one of the key milestones, the key figures of whether they can stay within your scope or whether they need psychotherapy or an art therapist or a psychiatrist or a pediatrician. And if those questions are raised, then their gut feelings are telling you that information for a reason. Again, your role is to guide people. You guys have that, like I've seen that on the Moodle and I've seen that in your engagement in class. I think you all have that about creating a safe environment. It is about expressing their feelings. It's not that we're asking you not to do that. It's just, you know, getting them to the surface, that every day of their feelings in the moment, more than the traumatic past experience of when they were 5, let's say, for an example. Yeah. And to stay on that, you know, climbing on that iceberg, it's important. But it's this safe space that we already mentioned, just you being there as a witness is enough for so many for their therapeutic healing. And then what is it the next step? Well, for me, pre-COVID, it was 450 contact hours of training to become a professional art therapist. And then to be registered on top of that's an extra 1,000 hours with the Canadian Art Therapy Association. There's a whole bunch of extra worthwhile learning in that. Sometimes it's a pain and I'm like, really, honestly? But then obviously honor it and value it, and it's ethical, because through all those hours I'm gaining more experience, and with the experience comes the how to handle XYZ. So yes, I found it worthwhile. Bridget already mentioned, you as tappers are kind of not umbrellaed anywhere, but we trust you to be ethical, moral human beings. And then as a professional art therapist, there's all this code of ethics, standards of practice, and we have Hadaya too, all of us fully insured, all of us meaning professional art therapists. Some of you are already psychologists in the group, and I am sure you have your code of ethics and standards to follow too. We have supervision. So on the third point there, it talks about supervision. We have supervision whether we're training or qualified. And I don't know if I mentioned this already, but in training, it's every 10 sessions, you speak to a supervisor to talk about caseload and go through how to navigate that. If there's anything tricky, awkward, frustrating, or praising, like what went well, what media could you use next time, etc. And even after, like now I'm an art therapist, I still have to have supervision. It's still really valuable. And I still get, sometimes, I don't mean to, but sometimes I get my knickers in a twist and it needs just that perspective and that extra person to go, okay, let's, see the wider picture here. And that's just safe. It's all about being safe. So let's go on to the next slide. So we're coming on to another exercise right now. This one is a bit more diagrammatical. And here is an image of batteries, energy and depletion. We're talking about closure. You're coming to an end of a series of working one-to-one or with groups or large groups. And they're getting tired. Potentially some of them are energized by the new discoveries they've learnt about themselves, and the sessions are their own self-care. And sometimes because of what's going on, maybe their energies are down. Maybe it's not to do with the session, but in life in general, outside of your sessions, their energy is down. And how does that play out on yours? And how is your energy? Is it up? Is it middle? Is it down? And so we're going to just do this exercise for right now. And in a moment, I'm going to ask you on a new piece of paper to put it landscape and to just quickly sketch out those batteries. And in the top half where you see the title Energy and Depletion, you're going to write your own self-care strategies that you do right now. How do you look after yourself day to day, week by week? You can throw in some I wishes. I wish I could do this to look after myself, but a lot of it I'm going to ask you to put down what you're actually doing to look after yourself, even in COVID. And then, so that's the top, your self-care strategies. And then at the bottom, where there's that space, you're going to write words or symbols and images that represent what depletes you, what gets on your wick, what frustrates you, what annoys you, what gets your energy down. These don't have to be shared. There's a space for some of you to talk, but you don't have to if you don't want to. So you've got 10 minutes for that. Enjoy.
I think I'll just stop sharing so we can
Yeah.
come together.
The time is 6:07. So yeah, about 17 past, because I'm good at counting and math. That's when I'm going to ask you to come back. So 5 minutes for the top, self-care, 5 minutes or so on the bottom, what drains you. It's a pleasant thought, isn't it? Go for it.
Can you remind me what the second part is again?
Of course, it's what drains you, what depletes you, what saps your energy. Mhm.
At different levels, like the batteries?
Yeah, you could do it like that. You don't
Okay.
have to. Mhm. one more minute. Okay, I'm going to be asking some of you. I'm not going to speak your names out. That's not fair right now. I'm going to invite anyone who wants to share any insights that they have found out or rediscovered through that activity. Something they want to implement more, something they realize, drains their energy. So does that relate back to a client group that you shouldn't then be working with if they drain your energy all the time? Okay, so maybe think a little bit like that, what we were doing last week, who you do and don't want to work with. Who would like to share? Anyone?
I can say about a month ago, I took some time off. And I really, it's funny because the most drained battery, I just put something policy, blah, blah, blah. I do not ever want to work in management. The inconsistencies, anyways, there's a whole big picture, but it was funny how fast that got put on my really drained battery. So it's recognizing.
Mm-hmm. Honoring that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm always, sorry.
No, that's
Christine.
okay. I found that it's interesting doing this because I have self-care strategies came very easily for me to write down, and depletion, it's not that there was a lot of them, but they just seem like they're so much heavier. And the self-care, even though there's a lot of things that come to mind quickly for self-care, it's how often do we practice them as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I found that eye-opening for me.
Thank you, Christine. Bridget.
I find a number of things in both lists. For example, self-care for me, I'm a connections person. It's one of my top 5 strengths. And so I need people connections, but people are also one of the most draining things to me, because one of my other top 5 strengths is empathy. So I get sucked. So it's just knowing that balance of I need to have people around me. I'm that kind of person, but that's a big battery booster for me. But when it gets too much, then it's a battery sucker. Just
Thank you.
Balance. I'm not good at balance.
If I can connect to the other two that they were saying, the thing that appeared after I did this list is basically what is the battery is going down, basically because of my thoughts and feelings. So if I can, it's not necessarily the world outside or the actions or the people or the interactions, is the way I manage it, or just more practice about being mindful or being balanced or whatever it is. Because a lot of the stuff that drain me are stuff that at another situation or in another perspective can recharge me or fill my battery. So it's could be very fluid. And also I felt the same way about the first list being really easy and coming to mind really quickly, and the second one needed a bit of process. And I really think it's practice within ourselves. Takes time and practice.
Because we are all human, and when we're facilitating a group or individuals, you know, we want to be role modeling, and only at certain times and situations is it right to show the empathy of, you know what, life's hard for me too. You know, I'm not encouraging you to have that approach all the time, but we're also not have to be robots. Yes, my life is perfect, Instagram, fantastic. You know, like we're client-centered, relational, at their pace, and we're humans too. So I'm glad that this process has got you thinking. A lot of you thought about, I'm sure, self-care strategies often, especially in COVID. But this idea of how do you look after yourself and replenish yourself, so that when you're working with clients, if you're so full in a negative way, well, not negative, life is so full here that you've got this much space for other people and their stuff, then maybe don't take on so many clients. Maybe just have one a week or one session a week, right? Because then that's how to honor yourself and them. They'll pick up that you're half listening, or it's not your fault, but you don't seem so interested. They'll pick that up. And so, you know, just awareness that I don't need to keep preaching about, because you're nodding your head going, yup. But also at the end of closure, when you do, especially with groups, I've found with the adolescents I often work with, I have taken from the Big Life Journal. They have some free downloadables. They're a company that has a lot of iceberg thinking, you know, staying on the iceberg of like, how can we be mindful activities you could do with other age groups too, and populations. And they have like a little A4 sheet of 50 self-care strategies on there. And often I've made that into a little activity that they bingo it or circle it or identify one they might want to try for the week. And so doing that with future sessions too is a good idea, because you use the word self-care and people are like, yeah, self-care, yeah. And then they walk out of closure and like, what? What can that look like? So a bit of education sometimes as a facilitator is part of your new role, to help people disseminate that. So before we move on, because we're going to move on, I'm sure a lot of you've got other thoughts, so thank you. But just to go back to one thing that Netta was asking, and some of others were asking, Cara Jane, I think, because I've thought about it while you were drawing. It doesn't happen that often to refer. It can do, right? And it's normal and it's healthy to keep in your scope, but it doesn't happen that often in my experience, because the intake that you've done, the groundwork you've done to see if your client's even suitable has happened. So it shouldn't be a regular occurrence that you're referring here, there, and everywhere, because you've got the right type of population that you're working with, right? You've done that. If anything, for me, it has only happened 3 times in 6-7 years. And I've mentioned one of them, the student with the eating disorder that was beyond my scope. I'm not diagnosing that, not allowed, but I bet you it was. And the other one was more recent, in fact, in the last 12 months. And I referred her to someone else, and it was, you know, one of the questions was, what about the confidence in handing off, or something like that? Well, she comes bounding to me and wants to hug me all down the corridor. She's so happy that I cared so much to put her to the right person. And so it just played out well. And she's like, oh, you know, I'm like, oh, you know what? We can't share names, but you don't have to tell me what happens in your session. I'm just so happy for you. It's working out. Like, I can see how bright your eyes are, and you've got this different aura around you. I'm so proud of you. And they're like, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, okay. Just navigating that. but it shouldn't happen that often, because your intake has been solid enough to say, yes, I can accept you in the group, or yes, I do want to work alongside you, or I would do, but I think you're better suited to this. And so you kind of nip it in the bud before it becomes an issue. Does that help, Netta? That's one of the other things that came to mind. Okay,
Yeah.
so go on.
Sorry, it's really helpful. I just wanted to ask a quick question about the intake process. Is that covered in this course at all, or is it something we should think about carefully before starting our own practice?
We can talk about it a lot more, as today has to be about closure, but we can talk about the policy side that you're not governed by further on in the course. So wrap your heads around that. Try not to tell you what a contract should look like, because you don't have to have one, but we can share top tips, can't we, Hidayah?
Yes, of course we can.
Okay, good. I'll write
That was
down.
really helpful, though. Thank you.
No worries. Okay, so if we move on, in closure, often groups or individual, you could have something a bit playful, a bit more fun. It's less serious if there was any seriousness, and it's this kind of exhibition or art review for connections and insights and camaraderie if it was a group in that sense, and peer support and all of this stuff. And within that space, it's to doubly check yourself to make sure that the final time you see someone is the most non-judgmental you can gather in yourself to be. Okay, it's obviously always safe, but it's really non-judgmental, because the artwork they create that's going to be on show is often an extension of themselves, their states of mind, their feelings, and to have that on display, to come out of that kind of more intimate, this is my dance space, this is your dance space, like Dirty Dancing, but to come out of that desktop area that you guys are working in, you know, that A4, A3 size that you can grab, it's on display and all at once, right? Often people are sharing in groups or individually to you, or a triad that we talked about, but this is all at once there, boom, it's a bit more impactful. And so to keep that as safe as possible is to be as non-judgmental as possible. And so we're going to practice our non-judgmental faces and spaces. Are you ready? We're going to have a little fun thing. Hidayah and I planned it very recently. Let's say we've not done it with another group yet. We thought, why don't we try it with you guys? So we're going to show you some slides, and you're going to write down your thoughts and feelings on a piece of paper, you know, in notes. Let's see your own reactions to these pieces of work. Okay, here we go. Probably about 20 seconds on each slide.
Okay, 2 seconds and I'll move on. Next. Next.
Okay, so let's just speak out a word for the first one. Kim Kiva, it was inks into water in a fish tank and then taking photographs of the chemistry of that. So any words?
Alive?
Explosive.
Keep going. Say it again.
I said explosive.
I said alive.
Movement.
Yes.
Colorful.
Spinning.
I said an outburst.
Do you want me to bring up the images again, Nikki?
Yeah, sure. Okay. Do you know what, Hadaya? Just on a note to ourselves in front of everybody, no 3D, no nature, and well, not outside nature, and no indigenous.
Mm-hmm.
I'll have to add to that next time. Okay, next one. Any thoughts? Just shout them out.
Weightless.
Unexpected.
I thought taking up space.
Mm.
Freedom, I guess.
What did you say, Tammy?
Oh, I didn't say anything.
It was
That was
Pfizer.
me. Yeah, but I was gonna
Oh,
say
Pfizer.
restraint. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna say restraint.
Oh.
Yeah.
So yeah, this one.
Life.
Tailed.
Vibrant.
Busy. For me, it was busy.
Fresh.
Secure.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Ornate was detailed.
Over the top.
Faith.
Sacrifice.
Evoking.
Impactful.
Transition. Transition to me.
I said personal.
Okay. Who knows this one? This is from Andreas Serrano. Put your hand up if you've seen it before. Okay. So as facilitators, whether it's individual or in groups, you're trying to hold the dynamic of the space and honor the artwork. And that can be hard if it hits some of your own thought processes, but also trying to hold all the dynamics of, especially in a group, all at once. They've got their own thoughts and feelings. And in an art review or an exhibition, it's a chance primarily for that person. Say you have a 90-minute or 2-hour art exhibition or review, and everybody in that group, even as an individual, has X amount of time. It's about allowing and facilitating that person to have that time with everybody else kind of as best as they can, being non-judgmental, including you, and also present. And so all of this stuff that they're thinking, not being busy in their heads, there's different ways you can help to facilitate that, but this non-judgmental present space. And then obviously you don't quite know sometimes what your client's going to do. Well, you might never know. And this person, imagine that was a client's work, that is urine in a jar, and that's a statue of Christ in the image, and it's called Piss on Christ. I know you have your son in the room, so, but that is the title of the work. And so
He can. I have my headphones on. He
Okay.
can't hear me.
Okay. And so, you know, when clients share their titles, sometimes it's a shock, sometimes on purpose, sometimes it's to shock subconsciously, and they want to see what the reaction is. Quite often because maybe, I mean, you can fill in the blanks, but their mother, father, auntie, uncle had a reaction to when they wanted to express themselves. Will you have that same reaction, or is it non-judgmental space? And so it's important to be able to hold the shock, right? If we go back, Hadaya, to the other one, just work backwards. Again, there was lots of different feelings. And then the second one especially was less, it's still aesthetic, don't get me wrong, I'm an art teacher in my past life. They're all aesthetic, have different values. But this one, if you knew, put your hand up if you know about Sen Taylor Wood and this image specifically. Okay, she's an artist, she expresses herself, thank you, in lots of different ways. She's kind of 1990s, 2000, not that she doesn't do any artwork anymore, but that's kind of where this image era came from. And she went through cancer. And this is her going through a series of suspended images to express her story of cancer. This is how she felt. And so you've got these personal stories often coming out in therapeutic artwork as well. And it's creating that safe, non-judgmental space. Often it's enough to just gaze and look as a group. Because remember, you're not an art therapist. You don't have to spend half an hour debriefing and talking. It's honoring this visual gaze that's important. And so I don't know whether me even sharing that has changed and altered your opinions and what you think about the image. But if you can create these spaces to honor that gaze, then you're doing well. And that's often what closing's about. So we're going to go on to some more of the practicalities now of closing. You can take notes if you like. There's some bullet point slides. There's like 3 of them. And we're going to talk ourselves through it. Wait a minute. I know what I mean. Okay. Hadaya, would you like to talk through this one?
Yeah, sure. So often when I'm working with my clients, and like I mentioned, I work mostly virtually, we decide from the beginning that towards the end of 6 sessions, or sometimes 12, if I know they've booked 12 sessions, we'll do an art review together. And I've used 2 different ways. So I'll often say I need to take a picture of the art, because as art therapists, we need to share these pictures with our supervisors. And I need to add it to their files. But I'll also say, and we'll bring it up during the review so you can see what you've created and the journey you've been on. So I'll keep folders, and of course in a HIPAA compliant way, we're saving and storing the images. And then I've often done it in 2 different ways. Sometimes I'll create a slideshow. So I'll create a presentation of their artwork, and I'll put them in the order of the sessions. And very similar to what Nikki's done today, I'll just share the images, and I'll ask them to, we'll spend the session basically discussing how they're feeling and, what they're noticing about the different images as we go through the 10 or 12 pieces that they've created. And I've also recently been asking them to use the artwork and to create an exhibit in their space. And then they'll take pictures of how they've put them up on their walls and how they've taped them or Some of them are sticking them with blue tack, others are taping them, and they'll take pictures and they'll share it with me, or sometimes even they'll take their camera and they'll show me how they have them all up. And then this is their way of deciding. They're in control. It's their space and the images are in their space. And then they're in control of how they want to exhibit the artwork. So I've done it in two different ways. Sometimes I will do it for them, and sometimes they are the ones who are doing it. And sometimes I don't do a review because we've gone all the way down to the submarine, and I see that there's it may be counter therapeutic to bring up everything that we've been through and they've been through. And so I'll just say, let's talk about one of the images, and which one of the images would you like to share? And they'll select, and they have the artwork, so they'll bring up just one image and we'll discuss that image. So that's often how I've done art reviews and exhibits. So here it says, how do we work through an early termination for ourselves and our client? What to do if a client doesn't show up near the end of their scheduled sessions? And what happens to the artwork if the client doesn't show up for many sessions and you can't get a hold of them as a therapeutic practitioner versus an art therapist? So over to you, Nikki.
Those are questions. We're not going to go into detail tonight. It's just good cognitive meta thinking for you to think about how you're going to handle the people you work with. As a therapeutic practitioner, you're not bound to keeping the work after they've finished. I know that I've always invited, I'll just tell you, I have something that I've developed called Artwork Heaven. It doesn't seem to offend anyone. I work with lots of people from all different faiths. There's more of a chuckle than anything. We've done the art review, which I'll talk about in a minute. And then I remind them that it's up to them if they want to leave it there, and it gets carefully discarded and recycled, and just it just won't exist anymore. They won't be able to get at it anymore if they leave it in my studio, or they can take it with them. And there's benefits of them holding on to things. It's therapeutic, and benefits for them to let go. It all does depend, but because I'm extremely client-centered, we talk a little bit about that, and some of them still choose to take one or two choice pieces away with them. Some of them stand there and go, I don't want any of it, thank you so much, processed all this, and they leave it all in the Art Heaven, which is code for they'll never see it again. And that seems to work. I've never had anybody come back and go, oh, I said I didn't want that, but I really do. It's been facilitated in a way that they, by the time they leave the last session, they know that's their last chance to take it if they want to take it. Often some clients will say, can I take a photo of it, but keep it here? And I say, yeah, of course you can take a photo and have the photo. When you keep it here, though, I want you to know that I'm not going to look at it every night before I go to bed. Like sometimes a client wants to keep it because they want you to have it and keep it and think of them forever. And as much as I tell them that they were very special and I really honored the time we had together, I won't actually be keeping it either. It will be recycled. And that's good too. You don't want to promise to keep it all forever. You'll have no space left. I've got some examples here, but one of the things that works best for me is that I ask them to take all their work out. So they have a drawer each or a folder. They take all their work out in their last session. They know that the art review is coming up, and I give them time to just look at it all and arrange it in a way on the floor that resonates with them. I use the word resonate a lot. It's just part of my therapeutic language. And they have 10 minutes or so, 15 minutes to just arrange it on the floor in front of them. I have a big space that they can use the floor, not the table. And then I invite them, if they want to share any of how it feels to look at it, they do. Sometimes I get them to stand up and walk around and then sit back down, and I ask if I can sit next to them, and they usually say yes. And in fact, sometimes I say, where would you like me to view it? how would you like me to see this work? And they tell me, can you be over here? Can you sit on a chair? Can you stand up? Can you sit down? Can you lie here? Like, okay, great. And so we look at it how they want me to see it. That's one-to-one. If it was in a group, I ask them, where would you like us to see it? And I'm kind of like the buffer. And then they say, oh, well, just where you are, it doesn't matter. Or actually, could you all come over here? And so we all go over there. So there's a lot of autonomy, a lot of choice. And it's really good for the last session to give them that as they leave. Well, to remind them they always had it. And then after they've shared some insights like of what it means to them to arrange it like that, I then give them a whole like half an hour, maybe 40 minutes to use a section of the space to show it up like an exhibition. But because I'm not just there's the wall, I say, which part of this room would you like for you? And they're like, oh, I'm interested in this bit, this bit, this bit, this bit. And they choose, say it's a group of 6, they choose an area each. If 2 of them want the same area, I leave it to them to figure out. I don't get involved. I rarely need to, they figure it out. And I've had some really interesting exhibitions. I've had kids turn tables upside down. They've got the 4 legs up, they've got string, they're making like a little area. I've had kids that take their work, and even though they recognize the chronological order, like Hadiah was saying that it was in, they change the rearrangement to do with meaning or value, or someone said earlier, the weightiness of it. And I remember one client in one group once, they had the work on the floor and it rose all the way up the wall to the ceiling. And it was like, and so did her spirit, so did her aura, so did her everything about her. Like, she started therapy there and she's leaving the door up there in a good way, like you could tell. When she shared, she like verbalized it. I've had clients that wanted to keep some of their stuff private, and they arranged it in a black thing, and then a bit like a pinhole camera, if you know what those are. They cut out a little circle and people were only allowed to see the bit that they allowed people to see. That was really interesting. I found that fascinating, because in the group sessions where they're all quietly getting on with their work, and then at the end of the group session they shared, when it got to the exhibition, they didn't want it all on show at the same time. I thought that was fascinating. What else have they done? I've got this to show you. So this is, there's no humans in this, so I decided it was okay to show you.
Can I spotlight you, Nikki?
Yeah, it's a small image, but it's not that clear, but it was a very large group. You know, we talked about large groups. This was 100 in a large group of 2 hours, and it was their last session. And now I put a huge rope anchor on the floor, and then they all had post-it notes, and they had time to reflect on themselves, their best strengths, their best value moving forwards, something like that. And they came down in silence and posted them into the act. This was huge. Like, imagine a living room, like this was massive. And then they created a big circle. So when you can't see them in here, but imagine like 100 people in a circle. And there was something powerful and ritualistic in that. The silence was honored, and there were 93 different cultures in those 100 kids. And so circles as a form is often non-offensive to so many cultures. Circles are quite prevalent, and so it all worked. This I'm going to flash up. This was for outdoor work. Some of you are interested in outdoor work. Here's an example of a art review, but it is work, so I'm going to flash it up quickly just to give you the idea. From back here, it's a postcard of 9 different sessions, and because they're a digital file, each session, the client, and I've done this a few times, the client, it works for me, you don't have to do it, but the client would choose the image that represented their feeling the most that session, because with digital work, often you might take more than one image and they're like, this is the one that, and then those 9 ones created that mini postcard. And when I presented it back in the art review, there was then time to even make another piece of work reflecting on those and seeing those 9 together. And that's also interesting too. So you can have an art review, an art exhibition, and you can decide if you create what space for them to create another final work on what they're seeing, or whether it's enough just to hold the space, have an exhibition. I think sometimes it's a bit of a difference with whether I'm in therapeutic practitioner mode or art therapist mode. So at some point you have to stop the debriefing and go, stop, that's enough, you have done enough. I've got one other thing to share with you. This is, I'm going to cover the person up. Yeah. Can you spotlight this, Hidayah? They're so
yeah,
small.
I can. I just wasn't sure if you wanted me to.
Can you see that? You can't even see who they are. You'll never know. Oh, well, I should do this on the face. There we go.
We can't see the face, Nikki. Don't
You
worry.
can't, can you?
No.
Okay. But this is a location I use often, this well, this kind of pond. And I'm trying to be really ethical. There's it's like they walk up through an alleyway and they have flour and they go around the pond and everyone's watching each other do it. And then they're encouraged to do a final expression, like an embodied full stop. And often clients would be like, woohoo, and the flour would go everywhere. And after some would like sprinkle and let it down. Some would just tap their bodies, their hearts, a variety of full stops. And that was not an art exhibition as such, because the artwork's gone, it was in nature, finished, but a nice way to end, you know? So depending on how you work, exhibitions and reviews and closures, rituals are all very important. So let's go on to the next slide, and then there's time for Q&As about closures. Okay. So you can see here as a photo, this isn't my photo, I'm assuming the clients in this picture are a bit younger from the way that their artwork looks. I mean, you do the best of what you can with where you are and what you have, and that's just a mantra. Why might a client not want artwork back? The artwork is a recording. We can talk about this more. Artwork is a recording of the therapy session, in the sense that it's proof, it's evidence, it's an extension of themselves and their feelings. I think we've kind of covered all that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Ethics and no surprise, give warning if going on holiday. Yes, I mean, the one on the end there is the same as letting my clients know that if they don't take their artwork with them, they will actually never see it again. They've got no other chance to ever get it back unless they take a photo. So similar to that, there's no surprises. Okay, there's no surprises that you have planned, that's in your control. So before we go on to that one, any questions so far? The first question, why might a client not want artwork back? It might be nothing deep or meaningful other than that process is done. They don't want the mask that they made of their inside and outside. They don't want it. It's done for them. Thank you very much. And some people do want it, some people don't want it. Anybody got any questions or thoughts so far?
Yes, I have a couple of questions. Is it okay?
Yes.
I'm not sure, it's long, so I'm not sure we'll have time. For me, for me, the whole, like, I can't even imagine myself getting shocked by some kind of a name of an artwork. So I come from the art world back in the day, so I'm kind of used to, let's say that the biography of the artist is kind of the last resource for me, in terms of the way I look at on an art piece. So being on the other side, at the therapeutic side of this field, I might miss a cry for help, or I don't know, there is one thing being, I wouldn't be judgmental. I'm not worried about that because of this, what I just explained, but missing the mental side of the artwork in some way. I'm not too used to analyze a piece of art in terms of psychology or somebody's inner world. That's not my language, in sort of speak. And the second question, I might have forgotten it already. Oh, okay. In terms of closure, I'm not sure I understand. Maybe it's again related to the past world that I'm coming from. The art review and the art exhibition as I understand more of the ritual that you were describing previously. I would imagine, like for me, a preferred media is art journal. So if I would facilitate a group, art journal is very private. So maybe an act of binding the art journal, or I don't know, just some kind of an act rather than an art review or a criticism or takes me to a whole different place, not a therapeutic one. So I'm just trying to understand, to explore other different closure methods in a way.
Of course, you can think about other closure methods. One of the most therapeutic benefits of an art exhibition or an art review, art exhibition is more stereotypically on the wall, like in a gallery, and an art review is the same thing, but it could be on a table, or like you saw on the chairs, or on the screen like Hadaya does. Okay, so it is actually almost the same, it's just the format. And the key thing is acceptance. So it's non-judgmental, but it's also acceptance, right? So if you have an art sketchbook and they process in there, then, I mean, I don't want to be judgmental. I'm saying that that's great. I mean, this is my art sketchbook, and I, as a therapeutic practitioner, I'm processing in those just as my self-care, which I can show another time. But when you see work and you show work, and the group dynamics by closure is of non-judgment and acceptance, there's something so cathartic and healing in that they have people in their group, or you as the therapist, just standing there and looking. You don't need to be a psychoanalyst. We're not asking you to be those things. And so I know you sound like you have a tiny bit of fear of missing something that could be really important, and I hear that, and I have a story about that which I can share. But it's about this acceptance and this dynamic of acceptance. And so even though for some clients they go through their own mini internal process of, oh no, what are people going to think? I don't usually put myself on show. I'm not usually that exposed. I feel more comfortable being hidden and only let like some people in. because you're prepping the group that they're going to like have this exhibition, they get to dose, don't they? They get to choose what parts of them they show or don't show in their artwork. And you've made that, just like we have on this training course, share what you want, don't share what you don't want. It's a very similar echo in what you're doing. And so when it gets to the exhibition, what I found 9.5 times out of 10 is that they're proud at that point. They want to show their work. They want people to see them and to accept them. And even if people don't fully, they want to feel understood. And this is their chance in a safe space. And so that's why the exhibition and the review are so valuable in this process. So for some it's awkward, but it's this proudness of the process, not necessarily the product. Some people are proud of the product, but it's this, wow, look, over the last 3 months I've whatever X, Y, and Z is. Hadaya, do you want to speak into that? Or and Inat, did I have you got further questions? Because that's okay.
No, it's fine. You answered both questions together for me in a way.
I'm a bit of a waffler, so and I'm dyslexic.
Yeah, it's fine. It works
like,
well. Works well.
This is why exhibitions are
you.
good for me as a dyslexic. Yeah, so a scrapbook could be a way, but then it doesn't. It's a little bit. I would worry a little bit about the hiddenness of this acceptance, you know, of this, like, this is what I'm showing. But doesn't mean it can't, like, you can use scrapbooks in the sessions, just not the art review session, unless everybody shows their scrapbooks, but they all know that and there's no surprises. They all know that people are going to have a look through what they've made. Does that make sense?
Yes, it's more of an art journal that can be everything. Scrapbook, I guess it's more of your memories and stuff. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I would unfold this, I think, as we go ahead, and yes, it's interesting, just an interesting process, I think.
Because I know that when I've been to a lot of art galleries and museums, you've got, for example, Claude Monet's work and Claude Monet sketchbooks, and they're as amazing to look through, right? And they're beautiful. Not that I've ever been allowed to touch it because I've got grease on my fingers and they're behind glass. I'd love to, but
I guess, yes, there is all this flipping. It's a bit different in terms of you have this book, okay? Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. It's I will keep thinking about it. But yes, I completely understand what you're saying about the closure process and the review and being seen and being heard and being a bit understood. It's all resonates with me. But I would love to hear more as we go on, just to figure it out.
There's something about an art sketchbook that is, unless it's no surprises and they know that everyone's going to look through it, it's perhaps a tiny bit too personal to have on display at the art review. It's just that it's a bit like a diary, whereas the art, exactly. There's just something. It depends how it's facilitated. So, Hadaya, do you have anything extra to add?
Well, I think, Nikki, I'm starting to feel that at some point, maybe midpoint with module 2, we could test this, right? And everybody can get a feel of what it's like. But also, sometimes clients are not able to recognize how far they've come in 6 sessions or in 12 sessions. And of course, and I'm going to try and think in terms of a therapeutic artist, but sometimes they started out with just the mechanical pencil, and that was all they were using, let's say for 3 sessions. And then suddenly they're into pastels, or they're into watercolors, or they're suddenly doing collage, and you can see the change. You can see the way they're just, their soul is is able to express a different language, every media that they're using. And you can see I'm excited about module 2 because that's my favorite one. But I think sometimes it's just that, it's the ability for them to be able to recognize their own growth. You know, it's just even moving through the media and what they were able to express through the different media, and to see it all together. And it's like, oh, yeah, that's where I started and that's how far I've come. And maybe that's all they really need.
And I think you've brought us back to the iceberg as well, Hidayah. Like, it's not necessarily about exposing 4, 12, 9 to 16 weeks of content and concept, but it's this, through the media we get to see this change of like freedom, or you know, they used to be a kind of control person, but they, you know, through the media they freed up, and that echoes on to XYZ in their life, but they haven't shared that bit. That's snorkeling down too far, but we can see through the art their journey, and they see it for themselves. So
sorry, Nikki, I'm interrupting. I also want to talk about what Inya said about missing things. You know, we may be missing things, and I think even as an art therapist, I may be missing things, right? But we're focusing on the elements. We're focusing on the structure. We're focusing on the colors, on the lines, on the shapes, on the forms, right? So we don't necessarily need to go any deeper than that, right? We can just be focusing on those elements. Yeah. And so just remembering that, you know, we're even after 3, 4, 6, 10 years, we still may miss things, and that's okay.
Yeah. So when I was training, I had one example of missing something, but it's okay. It's okay because it's just is life. But I'll quickly share it. I did a group on transition, moving from college to university or work of world or back in, you know, beyond. And there was a bit of I had 4 groups, and it was a bit heavier than the others. I held it and I was supervised through it. And what I did there was one girl who in the art review had done this tree. I can talk about it, I just can't show it you. Don't have it anymore anyway. This tree, and it was just red blood in all the way through, and on, you know, like where owls sit stereotypically. We are trained to kind of see wounds in images, but anyway, there was this vagina vulva situation, and like it wasn't spoken about. It was there. I was almost like the rest of the group didn't really get it. It was, you know, it was facilitated okay, but I was like, whoa, there's something there. It was the last session, didn't want to open a can of worms. So what the supervisor encouraged me to do was to get them all back one-to-one. It was a group session, right? But to do this one-to-one process with all of them for half an hour, I just happened to have the time. And I was like, oh, let's have a reflection and a review and how did that go? So it was like, we're going to ask you to do a reflection on the module, but it was with me one-to-one, right? So it was not a questionnaire online. And in that process, which we were going to do anyway, I had a chance with that person to say, I did notice all that red in that tree. That's all I had to say. They then disclosed, and I said, you know, I did prep it with like, if you disclose something and it's of harm, I have to pass it on. So the way it went was that she was like 2 weeks away from leaving college and had done a doorknob handle, wanted someone to know her stuff and her history. Didn't go to, we have a school psychologist at the time, but she didn't go there. It was in this image. And so we looked at the university she was going to, and we looked at the mental health support there, and I signposted her into someone that she could reach there, and one person outside of university, one institute. So, and I basically just said, you have these 2 places to signpost to. Thank you for sharing. It was okay. She didn't want to go into it more. That was all she needed. She wanted someone to know. And so that would be but I wouldn't call it a missed because it was spotted and it didn't need anything else at that time, honestly. But I still did my due diligence and, you know, signposted her on, and good luck to her. She was okay. And so I think Hadiah's right. That person has what they need at that time, and you don't need to worry about missing something, because you'll all be present and you will be there with them in that. Do you know what I mean? Like, you won't miss it. And if you do, it was meant to be missed at that particular point. You have to trust the universe. And you can always get supervision, and they can like either affirm or help you with a rescue plan. It's fine. Okay, so moving on, it's 11 minutes past 7. We need about 10 minutes to show you what to do for module 2. So we've got 10 minutes left. Am I right, Hadiah, that it's now the official Q&A time?
Well, we just have this one slide about how to create a closing, and we can just give them a few minutes to read through this slide.
That's right. Please read through the slide.
Yeah. I like the 4th point here. What do you notice about your work? Because sometimes, you know, they notice something, and it's important for them to share what they're noticing. And oftentimes, if they don't know or they don't have anything to share, I've sometimes said, which image are you ready to release? And then it gives them a chance to kind of go through the images and say, oh, I think I want to release this one. And if they're in their space, I'll say, how do you want to release it? I've had a client say, oh, when I go on my walk on Saturday, I'm just going to drop it in the lake. You know, I've had another one say, oh, the paper shredder is right here. I'm going to dump it there. And which one would you like to rework?
That's a great one.
So release and rework, because it gives them, you know, it just gives them something to think about.
You could almost make kind of, you know, like reduce, reuse, recycle, refuse. You could make like a 4-point.
Yeah, I'm sure everyone can come up with more. Yeah,
that's good. I have often, you know how we started this module where you'd had a found object? I often go back to that amalgamation of objects and ask them, do you want to reconfigure where that looks and what that looks? And sometimes that happens. And they're like, yeah, that feels like our route now. Often I've got a whole tray of natural objects, and I say, can you pick one that you feel right now? Sometimes I say, can you pick one, if you remember, can you pick one how you felt as we started and how you feel now? So you've done the art. This is the very end of the art review. It's in the same session. You have an art exhibition, art review, and then after everyone's looked, shared possibly, you have something like a ritual, a closing something that just ends everything. And that can be a variety of things. I often had a picnic blanket in my indoor space with a bowl on it, one of those singing bowls. And they all just came and gathered back, and there would just be this kind of comfortable silence, and with this noise kind of ringing out the sessions, if that makes sense.
Should we move on, Nikki, to the next slide?
Yeah, I just do want to say one practical housekeeping tip. Often these are such poignant, like have some tissues. Like have a box of tissues, like often they're needed. And for people to go out to the bathroom and back in, the energy goes out the door and back in. So kind of have glasses of water and tissues in the space. Be ready for some tears of release, cathartic, no problem. Especially in a group, they kind of have each other's back in a sense. And even if there's some anger, that's okay, like a release of anger about something. And then there's that thing of like, unless you want to clean up, all that stuff, you do need to plan in time of group clear up and transition from that space of like magic, pure cathartic healing magic, however you want to phrase that, the realness of it, to, okay, brushes over there, can we put like garbage there, don't forget your coats or your keys, and you know, this kind of transition back into real housekeeping life. Please close the door behind you, thank you, take care. So you need to kind of figure out how as a practitioner you're going to manage that transition.
How do you handle, like, I know the Kleenex, I've always been taught we don't give them the box because it's kind of saying stop crying, but it's there available if you want it. But what about the people in the group who are they think they are the nurturers, and I'm going to take care of you, and I'm going to touch you because you're crying, or I'm going to try and hug you, and it's like, get away from me. So do you talk about that in the opening, about group agreements or group rules that we don't touch anyone without permission, we don't, you know, how do you do that?
I'm just trying to wrap my brains. The people I have worked with often are between 16 to 19. Okay. And so they have an awareness of personal space. I haven't really worked with 4, 5, 6-year-olds who might be all on top of each other. So you could get advice from someone else. But they generally, from my experience, respectful of personal space. I do hold the silence and the feelings. I'm not rushing to be like, so who's next? Or don't worry, you know, it's just there. In terms of touching and hugging, there have been times where someone has gone over or just like grabbed their hand, but often, you know what? And it has been appropriate and with an invitation, but most of them do, but they don't have to, is a group hug to kind of get that social body connection in a way. I've just remembered a lot of flashes of like, okay, those that want to come off your chairs or stand up from the picnic blanket, we're going to have a group hug for about 30 seconds and then we're going to release. And that has naturally happened and it's had people's permission. I can't remember anyone who's never done that. But if they didn't, it's okay. It's fine, because I've said you can just sit there and watch, and by you watching the group hug, you are part of it. I've also had a thing where people have been, someone who has been upset. It wasn't like group, but just that everyone turned their body language towards that person, but not touching. So we're all kind of giving the energy.
I guess I'm the kind of person like, please don't touch me.
Yeah.
Please don't try and hug me. Yeah. And I've had lots, especially in women's groups, where they want to be nurturing and all that stuff. So I just wondered if you talked about that at the beginning.
Yeah. To,
you know, ask permission or to, you know.
No, it's really good to talk about that, especially to give people permission to be like, you know what, if you're, whether you're an introvert, whether whatever your story is, you are more than welcome to be warm without having to be touchy-feely, right? And or accept that. And so it's just this space of that's okay. I don't necessarily think I've had it as my first conversation ever, but yes, like there's a dynamic agreement at some point of what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. I know there's something on the tip of my brain that I'm trying, oh, this thing that you said, Carolyn, this is for everyone. Well, I'm looking at Carolyn on my screen. There's a scope of practice out there, from tappers to psychiatrists who do, it's like, do you put the toilet roll this way or the toilet roll that way? Do you offer tea and coffee and biscuits or do you not? Like, from a psychological therapeutic type of, you know, do you want to keep giving and they take? Or do they self-care and they've eaten enough before they got there themselves? And after they leave, if they're hungry, they'll go get something on the way home. Like, where are you in that? I know my supervisor will, if she was here right now, she'd be like, no. No teas, coffees, biscuits, not paying for it, not doing it. for many good reasons, and I respect her, one of the most ever in mental health practitioners. But for me, I always have right there in the middle tea, coffee, and biscuits. So, and there's a whole range in between, and that echoes on what you're saying about nurturing. So some do it touchy-feely, some nurture with nourishment and drinks, but some don't, but they're still nurturing in different ways. So, you know, that's whole part of you all deciding how you're going to be. The person that always takes the whole pack of biscuits, there needs a conversation there at some point, because that's unsustainable and there's something bigger going on there. So if you do offer it, like, watch what happens with the behaviors. Looking at time. But yes, essentially the short answer is, Carolyn, yes, discussion is great. Bring it up. What do people want? The essential agreements.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you can add it to the essential agreements right at the beginning. Yeah, I would do that. If you've been working with women and you've witnessed it, Carolyn, I would definitely encourage you to add it to the list.
Especially if they're women who have been mistreated, right? But any women, yeah. Okay, so I can't see the clock because you're screen sharing, so I really conscious.
Well, it's 22. It's yeah, so we've got about.
Then let's carry on.
Well,
okay.
I think, should we just go straight into what to prepare for TAPS 2 and then come back to this, Nikki?
No, the other way around.
Okay, so let's do this.
The preparing will get more cognitive again. So
okay.
Hadaya, we're going to move on to a 1-2 minute thing with Hadaya. Go.
Okay. So it's a there's a need for a transition here before we say. So let's all just see if you can sit up straight and maybe just place your feet on the ground. Let's all take a deep breath. And I want everyone to think of a one-word closing to reflect on how you're feeling right now and what it's been like as we are coming to the end of module 1. So what's the journey's been like for you? And it's kind of a lot to ask, but just one word if we can. I'm going to share a whiteboard and I'm going to invite everyone to, so let's just share the whiteboard. Can everybody see it on your screen? Are you seeing the whiteboard? Can everybody see if they're able to find the little black panel with all the different annotate buttons?
You remind people to click on view options and it's...
Yes, so there's a view options, could be at the top or at the bottom. Just look for view options. Once you find it and click that, you'll see the annotate button. I can't see everybody, so just let me know if you're finding it, not finding it.
Found it.
Good. Okay, so you're welcome to use the text and type a word, but you're also welcome to find the little draw button and select a paintbrush or a stroke and use a different color and just use that to add your word. Is there anyone who can't find the text, or everyone okay?
Can you save that, Hadaya? Is it savable?
I can take a screen capture, but it is savable, yes, and it will save.
I don't even know if that's a word, savable.
I mirrored it.
Little stuff. Okay.
All right, so we'll stop sharing. Is everybody done? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
We move into our last few slides then to bring module 1 to a close by thinking about module 2.
Are you seeing my screen?
Yes, but we need to see the next one.
Sorry, yes.
That's right. And the one after that. The magic of media. Woohoo!
Yes.
This is Hadaya's favorite one.
Yeah, so basically getting ready for TAPS 2, and if you've all checked Moodle, I've seen some of you have already checked out the materials list and basically been reading through it. I can see you were online, but you are all enrolled in the second module. So don't worry if you can't buy all the materials that we have listed in the materials list. We're just inviting you to see if you can prepare a graphite stick or a mechanical pencil for next class. And I've got images here in case anybody needs to mechanical pencil and the graphite stick. Color pencils, pens, Sharpies, markers, oil pastels. And yes, here it's together we will explore when, how, and why these media are used with various clients and what they're tickling in their brain. And if you can't find a stick, basically as hard as you can, so even just a pencil, and make sure that you're able to kind of sharpen it so it's nice and sharp. And the HB, or basically the H and the B, we've explained it here. The H means hard graphite and the B is soft. So if you have any of those options to kind of just have it available, like the different it comes in HB, H1, H2, H3, and then B1 all the way from B4 to B9, whatever you have really. We don't want it to seem like you need to go out there and buy stuff. If you have it, great. If you don't, it's okay. But yes, TAPS 2 is all about the media. So we're going to have a lot of fun with all the different media. And yeah, this I love this image. I remember Cheryl Ann was exploring in her kitchen with some of the pastels, and she added them and placed them in the freezer. This was the end result. Yeah. And a reminder that there is a course evaluation at the end of TAPS 1. So right at the end, there is an evaluation. We please invite everybody to fill it in. It's anonymous, so we'll never know. You can say whatever you like to say. And it is extremely valuable to us to know some of the feedback that you have. We'll never know who said what because we basically received them all anonymously. So just share away if you've got any feedback for us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's the end of the slides here.
Yeah, like I can't believe it's 7:30. We're bang on. Very proud of Hadaya and I and all of us as a group. So thank you for your contributions. You all contribute and it's all of value. So thank you very much. I can definitely see different people take different notes at different times and nodding. I'll borrow that. And a lot of this is the course from CIAP, but also you guys sharing with each other. So Thank you very much. There is something else I want to share, but I'm going to leave it for module 2 as a hook. I have it here. It's 7:30. We promised we'd finish on time. So it's next week, isn't it, module 2? It's not like a summer holiday break and then we come. No, it's next week. Yeah, okay. So all right then. So
we used to have a 2-week break before, but we realized that students wanted it just all to keep
on going.
So, yeah,
relentless. Glutton for punishment. All right.
Yes,
well, have a lovely rest of the evening and action some of those self-care stuff that you wrote earlier if you need to.
Yes.
Take care.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful
Thank
day,
you.
everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.